Hello. Today, I'm going to demonstrate for you that you are under mind control. Whoa, sounds pretty wild, right? Well, let's back up. What does mind control actually mean?
Proceed, gentlemen.
The basic recipe for mind control involves three components. The subject, who is restrained or forced in some way to watch the content. The content, the stimulus, usually flashing lights, rapid repeated images or subliminals, symbols or words that invoke deep, subconscious reactions within the subject. There is often an element of trauma involved in mind control, whether the use of pain, drugs, or electric shock, the display of violent images to damage the psyche. We'll come back to this in a bit. And, finally, the controllers themselves, who are often depicted as scientists or technicians. They are both controlling the stimuli that are in the content, and they are monitoring the response of the subject. The key here being that there is a feedback loop established so that they can adjust what they're feeding in the content to elicit the response that they desire from the subject. Let's take a look at some depictions of mind control in pop culture. You might think that Hollywood only gives us weird fictional depictions of mind control, like this Anti-Mind 114, but notice that we already have a subject, a controller, and content, which is taking in this case the form of weird flashing lights and frequencies. Take note again at the technician's extensive monitoring of the subject. Although it doesn't really make sense to combine it with flashing lights and sounds, they also have the subject in a sensory deprivation tank here. The subject only experiences what the controller wants her to experience. As we move into more modern depictions of mind control, we start to see elements that are compatible with the reports from well-documented programs like MKUltra.
Prime Minister of Malaysia! He is bad!
What?
Note the application of pain when there's an objection raised. This is much more than just a comedic depiction of mind control. Look at the similarities in this depiction from the Lost series. Again, we see a restrained subject. Rapid display of images and symbols, words. For your reference, I've included a link to this compilation below, without me talking over it. A very explicit reference to drugs being involved in this process. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange pays special attention to the role of the controller. Here we clearly see a subject, a scientific, technical controller monitoring the subject, always out of sight, and highly traumatic content. Here's a brainwashing scene from a video game called Manhunt 2. Note the use of symbols and words to invoke specific parts of the subconscious of the subject. And again, look at the extensive array of scientific personnel and equipment behind the subject. The parallax view is the definitive Hollywood depiction of mind control. In short, notice the direct invocation of concepts like love and archetypes like mother and father. I've got to cut it short, but again, a link to the full video is below. There are innumerable other examples, but we can skip them because they all involve this basic pattern of a subject who's being monitored by a controller who is feeding that subject stimuli. Stimuli that affect the subject at a deep subconscious level. Alright, now it's time to flip the whole model on its head. Can you see this framework applied in your life? I've already told you that you're the subject, and you're not being restrained. So I have to demonstrate that you are being forced to watch some content. We would need to identify some mechanism by which this content was pushed at you, whether you sat in a car, a subway, or an airplane. When you are stuck waiting in an airport, or captivated in an elevator. We would expect to see the mechanism while you ate, whether you're eating sushi or wings. We would expect to see the content during recreation, whether you're bowling or walking through Times Square. You would expect to see it while you're in the waiting room, at the hospital, or at the mechanic. Yes, we are a culture of screens. We like to watch screens. We watch ourselves on screens. This is true worldwide. In fact, I don't actually think it's a difficult point to make. We are surrounded by screens. We're surrounded by newspapers. We're surrounded by people talking about the news. The news is the content. A year ago, I started my blog because of this image. I saw it in Germany before returning home to the United States, where everyone was talking about it. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing this image. You, the subject, were forced to watch this image, which is highly traumatic. You, the subject, were forced to see this image, and were almost certainly forced to hear courage and courageous associated with it. I can say this with some certainty because when the US Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was alright, and Facebook created a tool that allowed users to change their profile pictures into rainbows, more than 26 million people did so. So it's not just the screens and newspapers, it's your friends. You are forced to watch this content. So what else have we been forced to watch beyond a healthy dose of trauma? We would also expect to see symbols and words, images that invoke deep subconscious reactions, linking Confederate flags to guns, questioning whether it's a hate crime, calling the next shooting domestic terrorism, but then retracting the statement when the perpetrator turned out to be Muslim. This kind of programming has really reached a frenzy this summer, as a man becoming a woman was courageous, but a white woman becoming a black woman was unacceptable, unthinkable. And then shortly thereafter, folks who identified as vampires should be accepted. So people are just left confused. Can you see the mainstream media invoking symbols, ideas like race, gender, love, and patriotism, which invoke deep subconscious reactions? Can you see them invoking archetypes like Baphomet and the Joker or Trickster, all interlaced with trauma? Over the last year, I've demonstrated time and time again on my blog that when a term or idea is in the news, people dream about it. What's in the news reaches your subconscious. It reaches the collective unconscious. It resonates there. So, we are the subjects. We've shown that we are being delivered stimuli that affect us at a subconscious level. Now, we know that the controllers lie out of sight, but can we demonstrate that they have also established a system whereby they can monitor our reactions? In short, is the feedback cycle complete? Of course it is, which is why we know 26 million people changed their profile picture, which is why we know that Facebook can affect the voter turnout, which is why we know that people's very emotions can be manipulated via the placement of social network feeds. The collection extends far beyond the 8 billion likes that Facebook registers each day. As we know, they have a tendency to collect everything they can on their subjects. The feedback cycle is complete. So when you see a headline like this one, you now know not to try to take it literally. You now know that this headline language is carefully crafted to invoke deep subconscious and archetypical reactions. We'll take a look at decoding these symbols in the next video, but for now, recognize that the mainstream media is a mechanism of mind control. It is triggering subconscious reactions in you. Recognize that social networks and the NSA spying is a monitoring system designed to collect feedback on how these stimuli are affecting us. Share this video with a friend and stay tuned at hackdeeper.org.